Hi. In 2017, Bell Witch released this. Mirror Reaper, a 1 hour, 23 minute, and 15-second funeral doom metal album. Here's the track list for the thing. Yeah, it's just one song. One very, very long song. Here's what it sounds like. Of course, this doesn't seem like a formula for a release that would reach anywhere beyond a very limited audience. When I recommend this album to my friends, the reaction I usually get is one of bewilderment and then concern that I or anyone else has the patience or inclination to listen to it. It's clearly not exactly the most uplifting music, and it's also just really distended. But the thing blew up almost immediately. Decibel, Exclaim, Loudwire, Metal Hammer, Pop Matters, The Quietus, and Rolling Stone all placed it on their best metal albums of 2017 end-of-year lists. And as of the 11th of November 2023, the full album YouTube video of it has been viewed 883,483 times, and it's racked up 1,362,369 listens on Spotify. Even Pitchfork gave it an 8.0 out of 10. Admittedly, Mirror Reaper deserves a video of its own. A massive one-track piece of music in a super niche metal subgenre somehow goes viral and blows everyone's minds. But this video is going to focus on something else. It's going to focus on the album that followed Mirror Reaper. How do you one-up something that monolithic and gargantuan? Man, I need a new chair. This is far from comfortable, and it's I know the lighting is super dark and not ideal. It's winter now in Canada, and also if it looks like I'm reading from a script, it's because I am. I have it on the left side of my monitor right here. So how do you follow up an album like Mirror Reaper? Well, if you're Bell Witch, you release The Clandestine Gate, a 1 hour, 23 minute, and 16-second funeral doom metal album, 1 second longer than Mirror Reaper, and also with just one track. And then you also tell everyone that this is the first part of a song titled Future's Shadow, and you also tell everyone that parts 2 and 3 will be released in subsequent albums. Meaning if Bell Witch stick to this 83-minute outline, that the final result will be a song lasting 4 hours and 9 minutes. That's like 6 episodes of Gilmore Girls. That's a long song. So what gives, and why should you care, and why is Wagner in the video title? That's what I'd like to explore here in 3 separate parts. The first part, tempo, the second, cadences, and the third, discomfort. So this is the musical depiction of grief. Bell Witch, Wagner, and red wine. But first, a message from this video's sponsor, my refrigerator. My refrigerator is very small, and it can't hold many things. As such, I have to go grocery shopping like 3 times a week. It's horrible and it has no freezer, but I love it. If you'd like more information on my refrigerator, shoot me a DM. Okay, before we talk more about Clandestine Gate, it's a good idea to get a feel for what it sounds like. Spoiler alert, it's very sad and very dark. This is an album exploring themes of death, the eternity of death. It's an exploration of mourning and of longing. This points to the central questions that I'm trying to explore with this video. How does one create a musical depiction of grief, and why is Bell Witch so good at it? Enough jibber jabber, here's a snippet. I think if there's a primary adjective that we can use to describe what we just heard, it would probably be slow. Which brings us to point number 1, tempo. Tempo is a fancy term used in music. You may have heard it in Whiplash.
5, 6, and... Not quite my tempo.
All it really means is how fast or slow the music is. Look! Here's a metronome. It's also shadowing the entire side of my face. A metronome is something that can help keep tempo. It has no batteries at the moment, so it's not going to help much, but if I flip it over, there on the back you can see some tempo indications, or not because my camera refuses to focus on it. There is largo, larghetto, adagio, andante, moderato, allegro, presto, prestissimo. These are all Italian terms which are meant to denote a certain tempo used within music. There's also a typo on the back of this IMT-301 in which largo is spelled Lagrg. Lagerg is not a word. If you could see what I'm looking at, besides these textual tempo indications, you can see that there's a series of numbers. These are beats per minute, or BPM. This is slightly self-explanatory. 60 beats per minute is the second hand of a clock. 120 beats per minute is double that. In Michael Tauberg's article Anatomy of a Hit Song, he identifies that chart-topping singles distinctly cluster around 3 main tempi: 95 BPM, 130 BPM, and 170 BPM. Katy Perry's California Girls is 125 BPM, I guess as a reference point. I'm not sure why I chose this as a reference point. It's a good song. Bell Witch, on the other hand, operates slower, much slower. In the slower passages in Clandestine Gates, they hit 20 BPM, and in the faster passages, they can sometimes hit 40. That blistering tempo is slow. This may seem a point which doesn't even need enumerating, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Music exploring grief tends to be slower music. That's probably because when we're sad, we're not exactly bursting at the seams with effervescent energy. There have been studies done on certain traits found in grief-laden music, things like the crying motif, which we don't have the time in this video to discuss. But one of these traits that we found is that tempi used are far below 95 BPM, that 95 BPM cutoff. And Bell Witch pushes this to a very logical conclusion. They're not so slow that no beat is discernible at all, but they're so close to that point that if you showed up 20 minutes late to one of their shows, they're still probably playing the same 2 notes that they used to open it. The net effect of this is that the music gives us time to process and interpret our own feelings and revelations. There's not much room for that if the music is constantly careening forward at a chaotic pace. We're able to breathe with Bell Witch's music, to think about how each note played affects us, what memories they bring up, what realities they're making us face. Hey, speaking of memories, you gotta check out this perfume. It's from this Romanian perfume artist, Tuscovat, and it's called Inexcusable Evil, and it smells like iodine and blood and rubble, and it's fantastic. It's really something else. Okay, I feel like this is getting a little too philosophical, so I'll point to another more concrete fact. With a slower tempo, it gives gravitas to each individual musical event. What do I mean by this? The notes themselves stretch on and linger for such long periods of time that even one small change feels very significant. If you were walking and it took you 5 seconds each time you made another step, you'd probably have to decide more significantly where on each given day you'd choose to walk to. I think this segues quite nicely to point number 2, this notion of cadences. Essentially, cadences refer to the ends of musical hold on, wait. I have a piano literally right here. Hold on, I'll show you. So I played 4 different chords there. In the first chord, it sounds quite stable, you might say. It doesn't seem like it wants to move in any direction in particular. It's able to sit with itself. Once I introduce the second chord, this seems like it wants to move. It's not exactly as grounded as the first chord. And then once I introduce the third chord, that thing really wants to go in some direction. It really wants to end up somewhere. It's trying to get somewhere. We say that there's a lot of tension held within the chord. And where does the chord want to go? It wants to go back to the first chord that we started with. And now we have, to completion, a cadential progression. There are some possibly apocryphal stories told about Beethoven with his father, in which his father would come stumbling home after drinking at the pub and would go to the piano and play just this, causing the young Beethoven to then descend from the staircase and finish the progression with... I don't know, it could be a George Washington sort of thing. In either case, really wants to go somewhere. And the longer I would linger on that third chord, the chord holding a lot of tension, the more that we feel that we really want it to resolve, to finally let go of something. And that's where we arrive at the end of the cadence, or the cadential progression, where tension releases, where we move back from chaos to order. I know that last bit was a little bit highfalutin. I think you get the idea. I always like the analogy of musical phrases corresponding to spoken sentences. Sentences represent one unit of communication, one idea that you're trying to express. It needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. So, Sally, okay? Sally what? Sally did. Sally did what? Sally did her homework. That's a lot better. That's a lot better than just Sally or Sally did. In Clandestine Gate, Bellwitch incorporates an idea probably most known with relation to Richard Wagner, a German composer born in 1813, died in 1883. And there's too much. There's a swath of information to discuss about him that extends well beyond the scope of this video in and of itself, so I'll just focus on one central tenet. This notion of prolonging the tension felt within cadences or cadential progressions to a maximal limit, extending the sense of, I really need this chord to resolve for such a long time that you're nearly losing your mind. Probably the most cited example of this is in his opera Tristan und Isolde, in which at the very opening of the opera, he introduces this very unstable chord. It's been termed the Tristan chord. And he doesn't resolve it for the entirety of the opera, all 4 hours of it, until the very, very, very final closing section. In this, Wagner accomplishes a couple things. This perfume is really getting to me. It creates this intense sensation of longing, of yearning and pleading with these harmonies that we hear to sort themselves out, so to speak, so that we're no longer left in a space of limbo. It creates an atmosphere of attempting to reach for something, to try to grasp something, but not quite ever getting there until the final resolution. Think the green light in The Great Gatsby. He stretched out his arms toward the dark water in a curious way, and far as I was from him, I could have sworn he was trembling. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. This almost provides a nearly orgasmic climax when the chord finally does resolve. We've been waiting for it to resolve for so long that once we finally reach that point, it's like the biggest sigh of relief ever, of unleashing anxiety that has been pent up for so long that your stomach is not only knotted, it's probably out of commission. In Clandestine Gate, the first cadence we hear isn't until 21 minutes into the composition. And there are like only 4 or 5 cadences in all 83 minutes of music. That's not common. In most compositions, classical or otherwise, there are cadences all over the place. There's cadences on the walls. There's cadences on the ceilings. There's cadences in the kitchen. There's cadences in the hall. And the most significant of these cadences, the most significant climax and truly the only climax in this entire piece of music, we have to remember that, the chorus in pop songs and other genres serve as a climactic moment of culmination. The only climax and climactic cadence that occurs is 1 hour, 27 minutes, and 32 seconds exactly into the piece. You have to wait that long for the final climax, which finally resolves all the tension conjured in the preceding 87 minutes. That's a lot of tension. Dear Lord. Sorry, I had to towel off there. It was getting a little heated. So then why is any of this significant? It's significant because grief is not something easily resolved. We always hear of the 5 stages of grief and how we have to work through denial, anger, bargaining, and depression before finally reaching acceptance. It's not an easy journey. Long is the way and hard that out of hell leads up to light. Thank you, Professor Maggie Kilgore. I think for music to depict this process necessitates that it take a similarly difficult journey. Sometimes it even needs to mirror it. In the words of Hannibal Buress, whenever people are going through a struggle in life, they get really cliche. They say stuff like, I'm taking it one day at a time. You know who else is? Everybody. Because that's how time works. That's the only way you can take time. Were you doing it a week at a time before? Who are you? Who taught you how to do that? Please teach me how to do that. I want to get through this quicker too. I realize I just rendered a hilarious passage in probably the worst monotone ever, and thus took any glimpse of humor out of it. With Clandestine Gate, Bell Witch forces us to sit with our grief, to process it, not in real time, but maybe a synecdoche or a fractal of it. You don't get to the calm of acceptance without first the protracted process of misery. What if I did the entire video like that, just in the corner of the screen? God in heaven, that was a lot of talking. My throat is parched. How about our closing section then of discomfort? Ooh, l'amour. I'm going to say something here which might sound a little odd, but I really don't think that it is. Art shouldn't always be there to make us feel good. Of course, we've all heard the rhetoric that art should in many ways be challenging, of pushing new ground, of breaking down barriers, of making us question ourselves, questioning the world around us, questioning our relation with the world around us. I also think sometimes arts and music needs to be there to not only make us feel uncomfortable, but distinctly not good. Misery loves company, yes, and sometimes misery needs company. When you're going through something, when you're experiencing grief, sometimes you need people there to not cheer you up, but to stew in the grief with you, to empathize with you, and make you feel that you're not only heard, but understood. I recently went with a couple of friends, Poppy and Marianne, to see Bell Witch play live. They performed almost the entirety of Clandestine Gate, and before the show, we had sat together and shared a bottle of red wine, chatting about a myriad of unrelated topics. But in the back of our minds, we knew that this show wasn't going to be fun. We weren't going to the show to have fun. Really, we were going to the show because we knew that it would make us feel actively miserable. We were going to experience the catharsis that only comes through empathy, of a band playing music which makes us connect with our experiences of grief, which made us confront our experiences with grief. And I think it's only through that sort of confrontation that you can find solace in any resolution, be it a cadential or otherwise. A resolution which did finally come near the end of their set, just as it came nearly at the end of Clandestine Gate. With Clandestine Gate, Bell Witch utilized tempo, an extension of cadential progression to a maximal extent, and discomfort to ultimately bring a sense of closure. I can see my grief and acknowledge it, and therefore I can move on. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over and through me, and when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Alright, okay, that was a whole lot of jabberwocky, wasn't it? At the very least, I hope I convinced some of you to give this album a listen. I think I can guarantee that it'll be, at the very least, an interesting experience. And if it's not, you can also send me a DM. I'll PayPal you $10 or something. Here's a picture of a mountain goat that I like quite a bit. All right, until next time. How do I shut this off?